Hey, everybody, it's Tommy Canale, and welcome to Before the Lights podcast, the show to find out how those in sports, music, and entertainment made their mark. Today, he conducted over 500 undercover operations and served 27 years. A retired special agent and veteran undercover operative with the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, better known as ATF. A college football All-American candidate and high school football coach, he's also a New York Times bestselling author. An expertise in violent crime investigation, weapons, narcotics, trafficking, murder for hire. He's also a public speaker and a member of the Bureau's Enhanced Undercover Program. He received the United States Attorney General Medal of Valor and numerous other awards. He's been called a government-trained predator. Please welcome to the show, Jay Dobyns. Jay, welcome to the show.
Tommy, thank you for having me. You read that introduction just like I wrote it for you. So my check's in the mail.
I appreciate it. You're a Hammond, Indiana native, but raised in Tucson, Arizona. Your father was a carpenter and mother was a house cleaner. What did you learn from your parents that made you successful as an undercover operative?
Blue collar work ethic. They were grinders, like most of us out there, most of the people in the world. Our alarm clock goes off and we pack a lunch pail and we go to work. That was my folks. And that's what I grew up with.
You also were a childhood athlete in numerous sports. I'm guessing football was your favorite based on your past and stuff. What other sports did you participate in?
That was pretty much it. I mean, I did all the stuff that young kids do. I played Little League, wasn't very good. Played youth football, wasn't very good. Ultimately, I started to grow and that was where my love was. And so I found some success on the football field. And that's, I'm coaching high school football now. So it's kind of come full circle.
It's wonderful. I want to get into a little bit about your football career, but before I get there, in doing some research, I'd like for you to talk to my listeners about a time where, as a child, that your father told you about four letters that spell out soft and what that meant to you.
When I was a kid, my dad had a lot of lessons, and he told them in a very fatherly, blue collar, as I mentioned, way. And one of the things he said was, "What is the worst four-letter word someone can say about you? What's the nastiest thing that you think someone can say?" And, as a kid, my mind is racing through all the swear words that I could come up with. And it wasn't any of them. S-O-F-T. Don't ever let anybody say you're soft, man. Don't be, don't let that be a word that's attached to your name.
In 1982 to 84, you were the University of Arizona All Pac-10 wide receiver, named to the University of Arizona's All-Century team. You graduated in 1985 with a bachelor's in public administration and then played in the Canadian Football League and then for the Arizona Outlaws in the USFL that also had quarterback Randall Cunningham. How was it playing with Randall?
You know what? I think the information is just slightly crossed up there. I went to the NFL Combine, which Randall Cunningham was a part of that year. Doug Flutie was a part of it that year. I got a rude awakening to my lack of talent because I was paired with Jerry Rice and Andre Reed for the workouts. So we didn't really know how amazing all those guys were yet. They later proved that, with their NFL careers. But the quarterback when I was with the Arizona Outlaws was Doug Williams, who actually went on and led the Redskins to a Super Bowl. And, he was a Grambling state great and, was everything he's purported to be. In my short time with him, he's just like a really good guy and an amazing athlete.
You end up putting the football career behind you, and then you transfer into this law enforcement field. Miami Vice was the motivating factor on deciding to become a federal law enforcement agent. But how different was real life versus Miami Vice on TV?
Well, that opening was a kind characterization. I didn't put football behind me. Football put me behind it. I always had the dream of being a professional football player. And if I had an excuse, if I had something to blame, I'd use it. If I said, hey, I had a bad knee, I had a coach that didn't like me, I didn't get a fair chance. The reality of it is I just wasn't good enough. I tried as hard as I could. I wasn't good enough. So like a lot of young people, I didn't have a plan B. I only had a plan A. And it was to play football. And I was left, like I said, like a lot of young people trying to figure out what's next. And at the time, the television show Miami Vice was very popular. This was mid 80s. And as an audience, we had yet to see a cop show like that. Everything had been very procedural. It was cops in squad cars and in uniforms and detectives like reacting to crime scenes, in a reactive way, asking questions. And then Sonny Crockett shows up, and he's wearing a Hugo Boss suit and he's driving a Lamborghini around South Beach and he's meeting with drug kingpins, and there's tons of cocaine, at stake, and there's stripper models bringing in mojitos. At these poolside mansions. And as hokey as it sounds, I was intrigued by like what that life might feel like. I wanted to work undercover, but to truly answer your question, Sonny's Ferrari, mine was like an 83 Malibu that was just beat to crap because it had been passed down through so many agents. And his Hugo Boss suit was like cut off camos and a wife beater t-shirt and flip flops for me. The drug kingpins were guys that were sitting at the end of a tavern without two nickels to rub together and their plumber crack hanging out. The tons of cocaine, it was an 8-ball that was so stepped on with baby laxative, you'd shit before you'd get high off of it. The stripper models, that are glamorous in the movies and on television. I mean, they were straight skanks with 3 teeth in their head and tits like sweat socks with rocks in the toes. But when I got the true experience of it, when I realized that the life was not as it had been portrayed or characterized for me by the entertainment industry, man, I still loved it. Every day I loved it. I loved getting down in the weeds and getting my hands dirty. I loved the grime of it. It didn't discourage me.
November 19th, 1987, at 26 years old, you're a special agent with the ATF. You're sworn in on a Monday. 4 days later, you're taken hostage at gunpoint in a Tucson desert, serving an arrest warrant on a convicted felon who was recently released from prison. It resulted in emergency trauma surgery to save your life after being shot. Jay, how many times were you shot in that incident?
I was shot one time, and I'll tell you what, one was enough. The bullet went in my back point blank. It passed through my lung. It narrowly missed my heart. It exited the left side of my chest. And, after 4 days on the job without any real training, I was bleeding to death in this trailer park, laying in the garbage and the dog crap with blood coming out of my chest like you're holding your thumb over the end of a garden hose. With the feds, we get paid every 2 weeks. I hadn't even gotten a paycheck yet.
The name Dr. Richard Carmona. What does that mean to you, Jay? Can you explain that to our listeners?
Well, Dr. Carmona is such an amazing man, and he's a national treasure for us. He started in a very he started in poverty, man. He lived in Harlem, and he was the son of Puerto Rican immigrants, and got in trouble as a kid. Ended up in the Army, became a field medic, put himself through medical school. Ultimately became the United States Surgeon General under President Bush II. And luckily for me, he was the head of trauma services in Tucson before he became the Surgeon General. And he worked on me and patched me back up. And we've, now 30 plus years later, we still are very close friends. He has all my respect and love and admiration. He saved my life.
As I said in the opening, you've conducted over 500 undercover operations. Was that the only time in your tenure that you were shot?
No, I was involved in a second shooting about a year and a half later outside Chicago, following an undercover machine gun exchange with some gang members in Joliet.
Not far from my home.
Yeah. Beautiful people, loved working there. And got in a shootout with some gang members and got shot and run over by a car. And so, those first 18 months on the job were pretty dramatic and traumatic. But every time I went through one of those incidents, it did not discourage me. It had the exact opposite effect on me. It inspired me. I felt like I was bulletproof. I felt like I was invincible, like I was Superman out there. And of course I was young, and when you're young, you get over things fast and you recover fast and you're resilient. And so, but things happen for a reason, and things work out the way they're supposed to. And so I just kept trying to push forward.
Street smarts you have to survive in the work that you did. What kind of street smarts were you learning on the job as you were going that you didn't have getting into it?
Well, you know what? I grew up in a very safe, white, middle class, happy days, Richie Cunningham life. My folks stayed together. My family was together. I didn't have some troubled youth to draw from. So to become a good undercover operator, I had to study my enemy. I had to learn how the people I was interacting with, like how they dressed, how they walked, how they talked, how they lived, all those things. And that's like kind of in a way where football came into play, where football had an impact, because you study your enemy. In sports, you study your enemy. If you want to defeat them, you learn what they do and how they do it. And so it was really no different.
What's the wildest thing you saw in your career?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I'm not a big fan of dead bodies. I don't like being around dead bodies. I don't even like going to funerals when, the mortuary has prepared someone that's passed. It's hard to put my finger on one thing. After 27 years, there was so much violence and nastiness. But one of my first experiences, we went to a murder scene in the desert outside of Tucson, where a body had been sealed inside a steel drum and left in the desert. And when they popped the lid off that thing, it was human stew inside of that barrel. And seeing that and smelling that and experiencing that, all it did was reinforce to me that I did not want to be a homicide detective.
I can't even imagine what a homicide detective has to go through and what they see.
Oh my goodness, what they see and what they do, and the gruesomeness of their job. I think our patrolmen that are out there, the highway patrolmen, the beat cops, some of the carnage they see on the highways after some, really traumatic car accidents, man, that I do not like seeing human bodies tore up like that. I never got comfortable or was always very much willing to try to avoid being at least present for those situations, maybe investigating some of the circumstances after the fact, but I didn't need to see it.
I don't blame you. You were involved in numerous high-profile events, such as the Rodney King riots, the Columbine High School massacre, and the Oklahoma Federal Building bombing. Following the Oklahoma City bombing, you discovered a scheme that would have led to the bombing of 3 Las Vegas casinos, the Mirage, Treasure Island, and Golden Nugget. C4 bombs disguised as items that were going to be left in the room in a briefcase. by a gentleman's name that doesn't need the publicity to be put on a podcast and out there. So just somebody that wanted to do that. How did you find out about this scheme, and how close did it actually come to happening?
Well, prior to Timothy McVeigh, detonating his bomb at the Oklahoma City Murrah Federal Building, I was already operating in an undercover case outside and around Las Vegas, Nevada. The investigation from Oklahoma City tied Timothy McVeigh back to that area and back to some of those suspects that I'd already had contact with. So a natural response was to figure out who might know, who else might be involved in Oklahoma City. One thing led to another, and we uncovered a plan from a man who he had a vendetta against the ownership of those casinos you mentioned. And he wanted to almost disguise his vendetta as Oklahoma City Part 2. And so me and my partner infiltrated his plan to detonate C4 explosive devices in those 3 casinos. And we consummated that deal by actually delivering him these, servo activated remote control C4 devices that it was his intent to use those to implode those hotel casinos.
And did it come close, or did you guys get him before anything really happened?
Yeah, we got him. We had him detail the plan. We walked through the casinos with him, where he was showing us where he wanted to set the bombs off. He had blueprints of the casinos. He understood the infrastructure of the buildings and where they would do the most damage, where they would create the most carnage. Actually, when we delivered him the devices, there was multiple devices. The question was asked of him, you understand that innocent people are just they're on vacation. They're just here to enjoy themselves. There's going to be grandmas and grandpas and babies that are going to get chewed up in this plan. And he pulled his shirt back, and he had a heart tattooed on his chest that was filled in with black ink. And he said, you see that? That's a black heart. I have a black heart. I don't care who gets hurt. So that was the mentality of this guy we were dealing with, is that he had zero concern for the collateral damage that was going to occur, with him carrying out this personal vendetta plan.
And that's not the only time you were involved in bombs. You purchased 100 improvised bombs that would have flooded streets as well. And where was that plan based from?
That was in southern Arizona. And we had infiltrated various elements of the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang that were now out of prison and operating out on the streets. And we had led these suspects to believe that we were narcotics debt collectors and that we were using explosive devices, as part of our collections. And so over the course of, several months, we bought over 100 improvised explosive devices. And that case came to an end when one of our suspects murdered an adversary and then involved us, or tried to involve us, in the cover-up of the murder.
April 27, 2002, the River Run Riot at Harrah's Casino in Laughlin, Nevada. My understanding is the reason why the undercover operation was done with Hell's Angels. Were you in Laughlin at that time when that riot was going on?
I was actually with the Angels at the Flamingo Hotel prior to the riot. The riot took place at the Harrah's Hotel Casino. They were on opposite ends of the strip of Casino Drive in Laughlin. The Hells Angels were partying at the Flamingo. The Mongols motorcycle gang, their rivals, were partying at the Harrah's. And the Hells Angels, basically went up and picked a fight and turned into this massive riot that was captured on, hundreds of closed circuit casino video cameras. And so, the night that riot took place, I was with the Angels. I was already working on that case prior to that. The riot and the murder of an innocent woman with a bunch of kids by some Hells Angels in Arizona. Those two incidents were really what inspired our or drove our attempt to investigate the Hells Angels in Arizona and on the West Coast.
Listeners, Jay infiltrated the Hells Angels, who thrive on intimidation and violence. He posed as a gun-running biker nicknamed Jaybird that wanted to join the gang in an Operation Black Biscuit that ended up in 16 indictments. Jay, what was your mindset going into this operation?
You know, I was never convinced that I was the right guy for that assignment. I was not a biker investigator. There was agents, peers of mine, friends of mine that I felt were probably better equipped to play the role that I played, that were more comfortable in that biker world environment than I was. What I had going for me was I had some pre-established street cred in the community, in the criminal community. And then probably maybe my biggest asset, you know, I was never the best undercover operator. There's many that I admire that I felt were better at the trade craft than I was. I was just always willing. I was willing to try. I always raised my hand for assignments that others declined because they were either too dangerous or thought to be impossible. So when I was recruited into this case, I could not promise success. What I could promise is that I would do my very best to play my role.
I think some people in the public hear Hells Angels and think of Toys for Tots. Is that a front?
Well, to some extent, I think that they do have some altruistic, virtuous events. In my personal experience, I think those are cover stories that are used to help brainwash the public perception. You know, they do toy drives for kids. They do blood drives. But at the same time, they're committing murders, they're drug trafficking, they're gun running, they're running prostitution, human trafficking, extortion, arson, every type of violent crime that you can imagine is associated with that gang. And I don't think that you get to hand a kid a teddy bear and then pretend like these other things that are happening that they're involved in don't exist.
Agree. What was your motorcycle riding skills like to be in that operative?
Well, at the beginning, they were a little bit rough. You know, I could ride a motorcycle. I could not ride like these guys who grew up around it and whose, you know, the Hells Angels and motorcycles and that name and that patch and the death head they wear and the vests they wear. It's their religion. It's the most important thing in their life. So to think that I could keep up with these people and ride with them, you know, shoulder to shoulder in the beginning was a little bit rough. Now, after 2 years of running around with them, I got to the point where I could keep up and hold my own. But early on, it was a little bit wobbly.
Jay, how do you get comfortable in undercover operatives?
Man, that's such a good question, man. And I've asked myself that many times, and I've asked my peers that. I think that comfort and confidence go hand in hand. And I don't know which one comes first, if one leads to the other, but I know that they're both critical. Are you comfortable in your role, and are you comfortable in the environment that you're placing yourself in? And then that allows you to operate confidently, or are you a self-assured person and your confidence allows you to project comfort? That's a question I've asked, you know, my peers. I've asked some of the greatest undercover operators that have ever served our country that same question. And no one really has a surefire answer. I think they blend together.
Over the time that you were there, 2 years, did you ever feel like you were more one of them than who Jay Dobyns really is?
Well, you know, over that course of time, I mean, you run around with people and, you know, sometimes they're doing some dangerous, violent, despicable things. And so you see the worst side of people. But over that course of time, in an undercover infiltration that's that long, a deep cover case like that, you also see the human side of them. So you might see someone doing something that's completely disgusting one day, but then you might see like another side of them. And so as an undercover operator, you never completely can eliminate the human factor. You see people that you see good parts of their personality, of their character, and then they do something so treacherous and something so despicable. It's disappointing because you know they're better than that.
What changed for you with the gang when you started to become infiltrated more, and then after you faked the murder with the special effects and the cow brains and everything, when you actually started becoming a Hell's Angel? How'd that change?
Well, it's a gradual evolution. You know, I went from a process of the climbing the ladder with them. I went from being an associate to what's termed a hang around, which is someone who's hanging around the club, to someone who's a prospect. You're a prospective member. And as a prospect, you're under their thumb. Now they are controlling you. They're telling you where to be and when to be there. Ultimately, we faked a murder of a Mongol rival and sold the Hells Angels that we had assassinated a rival in the desert, executed a rival, and delivered our fabricated murder evidence back to the Hells Angels. And at that point, you know, when you present evidence of a murder to someone and you tell them the story and they can see it, most of us are running the other direction as we're dialing 911. The Hells Angels were the exact opposite. You know, they took their vests off and they put them over our shoulders and they said, man, welcome. You're a Hells Angels now. TCB, you took care of business. You've shown that you have what it takes to be a part of this organization. So welcome.
Did you think at the beginning it was possible to get through all their multi-layers of security?
You know, I never really thought that far down the road. It was very much day to day. It was, it went from trying to win and trying to succeed to trying to survive. The daily objective stopped being like, how are we going to win today? And it started being, how are we going to survive today? And so to say, you know, to answer that question, did I ever think that we would get through like all their security, all their protocols, the background checks, the polygraphs, the mud checks that they put you through? Like, to be honest with you, I don't know that I ever let my brain get that far down the road. It was day to day, trying to figure it out, like minute by minute.
Do they do an induction ceremony then when you become a member?
You know, like I had one, but it was not like what maybe the stereotype has led us to believe. And I think those probably do exist. Mine was pretty unglamorous, to be quite honest with you. It was, I would love to pump it up and make it seem something very glorious. When I was made a prospect, I was hand my prospect rocker and said, sew this on, you're with us now. Now when they put the patches on our back, you know, with the evidence of the fabricated murder in front of them, you know, that was a pretty important step, but it wasn't, it wasn't some big ceremony. It was very spontaneous.
Not so much the first time you may have spoken to, but what do you recall about the first time you actually put eyes on the godfather of local Hells Angels in Sonny Barger?
Well, you know, I knew the legend of Sonny, the mystique that he carries with him. He's the most iconic figure in the history of outlaw biker gangs. I don't think anybody will ever surpass his status in that world. You know, he's worshiped by the Hells Angels, but he's also admired by all the rivals. They understand what this guy did. They understand what this guy did for the culture. He took, what at the time was like kind of a ragtag group of misfits and turned them into an international organized crime syndicate that's worldwide now. You know, he's charming. He can be funny. He can be intimidating. If Sonny had, I've said this many times, if Sonny had used his leadership skills for good, he'd be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You look at what he started with and what he built the Hells Angels to. And then the Hells Angels, as the example, are America's export to the world of organized crime syndicates. Syndicates come here. The mafia comes here. Triads come here. Russians come here. Organized crime comes to the United States because they can churn money here. The biker culture is America's export of organized crime to the world.
What was the final tipping point to end the operation? And what was your feelings when you were told it's over?
Well, the final tipping point was, when I had felt like we had really reached our objective and had, thoroughly infiltrated the gang. It was at the same point that the leadership of my agency had decided they'd had enough. We'd been around in this tornado of violence for 2 years. And then, what I believed was this clever infiltration technique to fake this homicide was actually kind of the tipping point. I think it was just too much for my leadership to absorb. When they decided to call the case off, I fought very aggressively, very passionately to keep going. I felt like we'd put ourselves in position to do the most damage as investigators. And now they were going to, pull the rug out from underneath it. So I was disappointed. I was upset about it, to say the least. In hindsight, now looking back at it, 20 years later, it was a blessing. The people that were running things understood better than I did that it was time to get out.
How did the murder of Cynthia Garcia play into all this infiltration you were doing?
Well, it was huge. It goes back to the Laughlin River riot. Within that same time frame, Cynthia Garcia, a mother with a bunch of kids, ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. And she was at the Mesa Hells Angels clubhouse, which is where I spent the majority of my time during that investigation. One thing led to another there, and she was beaten, boot stomped to the ground. They rolled her up in a piece of carpeting and stuffed her in the trunk of a car. They drove her out to the desert outside of Mesa, outside of Phoenix, Arizona, to a town called Apache Junction, and in the cover of darkness, they finished the murder. They stabbed her multiple times and actually tried to cut her head off.
Were you able to then, in the indictments, finger the people that had done that?
Yeah, the people that were responsible for Cynthia's murder were charged, indicted, prosecuted, and I testified against them from what I had learned and what I knew during the investigation, and they pled guilty to the murder charges. There wasn't any hiding from it. We had proven the case. We knew what they did and how they did it, not necessarily why they did it. The why is always the question. Like how do things get so bad that you take a woman who can't defend herself, beat her to death, and then take her out in the desert and cut her head off? The why is oftentimes a mystery.
What was your feelings the first time after the operation is over, when you had to face some of these people that you were infiltrated? Now they know who you really are.
Well, I never, in my 27-year career, I never gloated over a successful operation. I never mocked the people I investigated. Betrayal is very hard. And that was the business I was in. Like I would meet people, and then I would work to gain their trust, and I would work to gain their loyalty. In some cases, I gained their love. knowing that I was going to betray that and that I was going to tell their dirty, dark secrets, before a judge and a jury and in reports, and document the terrible things that some of them had done. So I never set out to ruin anybody's life. That was not my job. My job was to investigate and get as close to violent crime as I could, and then report that back out. So there was no like overpowering sense of satisfaction in confronting them, but there was some satisfaction in knowing that I had done my job at the best that I could to try to protect and defend good and innocent people, in the communities that I worked in, against the violence and the predators out there that were looking to take advantage of them.
You had several death threats that included injecting you with HIV, torturing your family. There was even an attempted murder on your family. Your family home was burned. Jay, looking back on all this stuff that happened to you, do you sometimes think, man, how did I dodge all that and I'm still here?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I went through some very treacherous times, some very perilous times. I ended up in a dispute with my agency. I didn't feel like they reacted to the threats that me and my family were facing properly. And that was a very unpleasant end to my career. But you know what? Things happen. Things happen the way they're supposed to. People make mistakes. Like I don't live, I don't carry myself with a vengeful attitude. I don't carry myself. I'm not angry. I'm not looking for payback on anybody. I've forgiven the people that, intended harm on me. And I just hope that they learned, lessons from the things that happened with and around me, and that they won't happen again, so that the next guy doesn't have to go through what I went through.
That speaks volume for you as a person and your character. And I tip my cap to you that you're able to stand up, be a better man, forgive, and say, hey, I hope you learn from it, and let's not let this happen again. That speaks volumes.
Well, Tommy, you know how you, like any of us, the best payback we can get on anybody that intends harm on us, that doesn't like us, that doesn't want to see us succeed, anybody that can't find any joy in someone else's happiness, the best payback on those people is just to live a happy life. If you live a miserable life, then they win. If you live in fear, they win. The best way is to move forward, try to have a good attitude, try to find the silver linings. Many of the bad things that have happened to me, when I reflect back, actually had some very good elements to them, and some very positive life experiences from them that I need to learn from. I'm trying to learn from. Shame on me if I don't learn from them.
The other undercover operatives that I've had on this podcast have told me about dealing with PTSD after it's over. How did that affect you? And did it affect your family or your children?
Oh man, it did. And I've been tagged with that. I do not lean on it very heavy, because I'm not looking for an excuse, and I'm not looking for an excuse for my mistakes. I did a lot of things wrong. I conducted myself, especially as a young man, in a very selfish way. I made decisions for me, about me, for my benefit, for my career. I didn't factor in my wife and my kids in a lot of those decisions. I took for granted that they had a hand in what I was doing. And, very regretfully, although transparently, if I don't answer this question honestly, then I really have no credibility with your audience, is that the people that loved me the most, the people that cared about me the most through a big portion of my life, are the ones that I treated the worst. I took them for granted. I was not a good husband. I was not a good father. And I had to, I put a ton of battle damage on my family and thus, put battle damage on myself. And I had to learn some of those lessons the hard way.
Listeners, I want you to go to the show notes. I'm going to put links to Jay's books, the 2009 New York Times bestseller, No Angel, My Harrowing Undercover Journey to the Inner Circle of the Hells Angels. Jay, after everything you went through, what made you decide I'm going to write a book?
Well, there's a couple elements to it. The first book that I wrote, No Angel, I was in the midst of this threat situation, and my agency was not. They had no interest in chasing these threats down and capping them off or investigating them. They wanted to ignore them. They were not prepared to deal with a situation like that, and so the scope and volume of the violence that we were being threatened with. And some members of my leadership told me face to face, "You're on your own. Like, you're going to have to figure this out on your own." Well, like, I had limited resources, man. I was a civil servant. I didn't have the ability to run and hide or disguise myself or to bury myself and be avoided. So part of the reasoning was I was going to hide in plain sight. So I documented my story, from my perspective, with hopes that at least it would cause some pause in the minds of people that were intending harm on me and my family to think twice before they really tried to put anything in play.
Any chance either book could be made into a feature film?
There's been talk about both of them. Hollywood's a very trippy place. To make a film, I've kind of learned the hard way, as an outsider looking in at that industry, that, to make a film, there's a million moving parts, and they all have to mesh together and come together at the same time and same place. And so, I don't know that will or won't ever happen. To be honest with you, I don't know that it warrants a movie. I think it's a good story. I don't know if it's a great story. I'm a fan of Donnie Brasco. Joe Pistone is a friend of mine. To me, that's a great movie. Joe gets inside on the mafia and all the things he went through. I do not put myself in the category of Joe Pistone. I'm no Donnie Brasco, man. I'm a common man who was placed in some uncommon situations, and I just did the best I could every day.
Jay's follow-up book is called Catching Hell. I'll put a link there as well. And another thing that I think definitely, in my opinion, should be a full film is you did a short called Big Red Friday. Folks, I'm going to put a link to that as well. It's like a 20-minute short film that grips you from the beginning. And I think it gives you a tick of what it was like to what you went through.
We had fun with that. We wanted to do a short film. We just, me and some friends of mine, we wanted to see, how it would turn out. And we did it on zero budget. Most of the actors in that film, actually all the actors, are either cops or gang members.
Wow.
We had fun with it. We filmed it very quick. It's all based in truth and reality. The stories there, the events, the characters are authentic. And we enjoyed doing that. And we're proud of it. We're not filmmakers, we're not in the industry.
It's
we're a bunch of knuckleheads out here with a camera and a story to tell. And so we just did the best we could.
It's really good. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Most of the guys that have done what you do, when the question is asked, would you go back? I'll say yes. My question to you is, what would you do different if you went back?
Well, you answered your question for me. Would you do it again? Yes. I look back at my career. Starting the first week, I'm shot through the chest, and a year later, I'm shot and run over again. All the guns, all the drugs, all the bombs, home invasions, murder for hires, playing a contract killer, the Hells Angels infiltration, all the drama and trauma that came with that, the battle damage I put on my family, the threats, the agency fight, all those things. Would I do it again? Yes. I would do it as most people who make mistakes along the way, with hindsight, I would do it better. I would do it cleaner. I wouldn't make the mistakes I made because now I know where they're at. Mostly, if I had one thing to do over again, and I'm not sure I would change any of it, to be honest with you, but I would be a better husband, and I would be a better father, and I would not subject my family, to at times the torture I put them through, as a husband and a father.
In my opinion, the world is a better place thanks to people like Jay Dobyns and all those others that are in that operative. Because without you people, the world would not be in the situation it is. And people think our world is bad now. You have no idea what it'd be like if we didn't have people like Jay Dobyns.
Well, Tommy, I'll tell you what, man, and along that theme, as long as bad news is the news, we're winning. As long as bad things are what makes the headlines, we're winning. When good things start becoming news, when good things and good people start becoming the center of our focus, now we're in trouble because it's upside down.
Flipping the coin completely the other way. A heartfelt, it touched me. The video you have posted on your visit to Ghana with Heartbeat for Africa. I have to ask, what was that like for you?
Man, I went to Africa in a very dark point in my life. I was pretty pathetic, man. I felt like the world hadn't treated me fairly. I felt like some of the things that had happened to me were undeserved. And I went over to Africa on a humanitarian mission, and we went into some of these villages where there's no clean drinking water. They're ravaged by disease and by war and the maiming that takes place. Some of these villages where we went in, some of the young kids had never seen a white face before. And they were living in a life where they couldn't even hope to have hope. They weren't going to live long, and the short lives they were going to live were not going to be pleasant. And when we showed up and showed them love and paid attention to them and let them know that someone cared about them, man, the smiles on these kids' faces and the joy of just knowing that someone out there loved them and cared about them. It was super inspiring to me. And it took me out of this dark place where I felt sorry for myself and I was feeling pathetic. And I was like, you know what, these kids, as terrible as some of the things that have happened to you that you think they are, these kids would trade their life for yours quicker than you could snap your fingers. And that was super enlightening for me. I went over there to help people, and they helped me much more than I've ever could have helped them.
I'm telling you, it's heart touching to watch. I thought if you're ever having a bad day, this is a video to throw back on because it'll touch you.
Well, when you look at what's going on in society and the hate that's out there and the race issues that are out there, you got black and white people from different continents, different countries, different backgrounds, different lifestyles. And to be able to really see like what love can do and how when you treat people with kindness, like what that can bring out in them. Like I'm no role model. I'm no knight in shining armor. I don't have all the answers, but that's one of them.
Your team went 7-3 last year. You're now a high school football coach coming back full circle. What's it feel like now being on the sideline and teaching young kids the game of football?
Man, I get so much out of that. When the football program that I took over at a small high school was on the verge of being abolished. They were 0-19 when I got there. And not me, like me and my staff. I can't take sole credit for any of that. But the program was in dire straits, and the kids are the same. The ones we inherited are the same, but we taught them to believe in themselves, and we changed a culture of losing into a culture of expecting to win and expecting to be competitive and fighting back and not rolling over. And to see these kids who, when I arrived, were so beaten down, they were so defeated, they were programmed to fail. And now to see them expect to win, expect to thrive and survive and be competitive, I get a ton of satisfaction from that.
Jay, thanks so much for being on Before the Lights, everything you've done for our world. And I can't thank you enough for the stuff you've done in your past.
Tommy, thanks for having me. Very kind. Welcome to your audience, and everybody, God bless. Go be amazing.
Follow me on Instagram at Before the Lights Podcast. And there's 5 more minutes coming up of the interview with Jay you want to hear. And to hear that, you go to beforethelightspod.com/support. That's beforethelightspod.com/support to join the members area. Thank you for listening to Before the Lights. I'm Tommy Canale. And until next time, everybody, a salute, a chin chin.